We're a Motive podcast. You're listening to John Kai Herbert, and let's just get into it. Trusting in spirit, inner authority, and source. So there were lots of moments during the trip where it felt like I didn't need to do something, or didn't need to eat a certain food, or needed to surrender to certain components. And one of these was there was a night that I felt quite ill, and they were doing a ceremony that night, and I didn't want to do it. Like, I kept checking in with my inner authority, and it was like, no, you don't need to go to this. You really do not need to go to this. And I was like, fuck. We predicted to have 4 ceremonies, and I'm going to miss out on one. And it's like this whole thing around I'm here. I should really just push myself to go to it. How many opportunities do you ever have to sit ayahuasca in the jungle? And I was like, you know what? This feels like going to church. This feels like that pressure that I had as a child to be forced to go to church when I never wanted to go to church. Or this underlying societal pressure of the family to go to church. So I could see everyone was getting ready, and it was just like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do it. And there was another guy that also chose not to go to that ceremony, and it felt really good. He said, no, he just didn't want to go tonight. He was going to do a 30-day dieta after we left. Just going to have some water, and he felt it was just, he wasn't called to go. How that played out was that night they had a really potent medicine brew. How that works is the tribes in the area will trade medicine brews. So if some they've got a special name, like a Pachibo, I can't remember the name. It's like a P word. The medicine man of the tribe. They will make a brew. Sometimes they'll make a lot of brew, and then they will trade it in amongst the other tribes. So this brew was made by somebody else. Very potent, and a lot of people, new people and old people. The new people were like, that brew was. This is the day after, and when they came back into all their into the chalets that we were staying in, into the huts we were staying in, the energy was very low. The energy was like everyone had just been zeroed out, and I was like, what the fuck happened tonight? Because I was asleep. I just heard them all coming back. And the way it played out was the brew was so potent that a lot of people had experiences that were way beyond than what their psyche could handle. Even the veterans said, that was a really fucking potent brew. And they were amazed that some people were able to just sit through it. Some people were getting spiritually attacked, which I might speak about maybe later. And for me, it was just that I wasn't supposed to be in that ceremony. I had multiple spiritual mentors warn me that ayahuasca opens you up to lower dimensions, where you can get attacked. And I was mindful of that, and it felt like spirit was going to protect me anyway. However, I feel like there's a limitation to what the facilitators of the tribe can hold back, entity-wise. I think there's entities that are above their pay grade. They don't really understand the fifth dimensional components. They know that there are entities out there. However, I feel like there's an ignorance, and it's not. I just don't know of just how deep. There's some of the outer work stuff that I've been through, and how intense that can go. So for me, that was another standard of me trusting in source, trusting in spirit, and my inner authority. Also, was not doing Kambo. So Kambo is a frog medicine. They burn your skin and put the poison on your skin. You purge, and you're supposed to drink kasuma, which is a fermented cassava drink. And the Westerners have changed that to just doing water. And there's a belief around that when you change it to water, you're not getting the full effects, and people have died from it. So again, I feel like it's Westerners taking out of context traditional practice. The consumer, when you actually vomit that up, and it's much softer on the stomach. Another sip of water, and it's something that looked like it was much more healthier to do. I got told by my inner authority not to do Cambo. So I went down to cheer on the squad that were doing it, and just to see like what it was all about. So I met the frog. They would collect the frogs in the morning and watch the whole process go down. There's like 4 a.m. in the morning. We'd like go down to this special sector of the camp where they do the 30-day dieters, and like the energy in that area was powerful. They cultivate their own ayahuasca there, and there's all medicine plants in the area, and you can just feel the difference. And there's a little stream offset of the Amazon running through that area. It's beautiful, like it was perfect for Cambo. So basically, when you take the medicine, you like sit in the water, and you can become like incontinent. You can poo yourself, and you can vomit, and and it does something to all your capillaries on your face. So it looks like it swells up your mouth, swells your eyes, and when the people were finished, like, they turn around, and their faces look like frogs, and you can't help but laugh. And there's a humility that comes from that. However, I feel like that medicine just wasn't for me. Like, I got to see the frog, have like an inner connection with the frog, and see how they're tied to a tree branch and how they scrape the poison off. The poison on the head is more potent, and the poison on the leg is less so. So you can choose to have how many dots and where you get the poison from. So a lot of people chose from like 4 to like 8 dots. I think over the 3 sessions of Cambo, some people chose to have more dots, and the more dots you have, the more potent the poison is in your body. Excuse me, and the more somatic experience that you have. The rumor is that Cambo is a spiritual cleanse and a physical cleanse, and a lot of the people just reported that they felt much cleaner afterwards. There's a specific diet you need to do for Cambo, where there's like no sweets, no sunlight, and no sex, and no ape. So it's like you study the medicine while you're under the effects of the medicine. Can also amplify the effects of ayahuasca, which is where, when I said I wasn't doing Cambo, everyone said, "Oh no, you have to do Cambo because it amplifies the effects of the ayahuasca." And I was like, "Well, that logically makes a lot of sense." And like, for me, it was just like, no, there's something in doing Cambo that's just not for me. I don't need to do it. And I don't know what that eventually was, but for me, the ayahuasca was fine. Also, amongst the trusting source, spirit, and inner authority was not eating certain foods. The food hygiene in the area, they don't really have food hygiene. So food could be sitting out at like room temperature for extended periods of time. Plates would come out with water on them, which is not really good. Sometimes I'd eat some food, and my mouth, I'd be like, this doesn't taste right, and I need to spit it out. And then what started to happen was that I just start asking myself, should I eat that? Should I eat that? Should I eat that? And my inner authority would just tell me yes, no, no, yes. And I felt like I got a really good connection with my inner authority around that. And that's transferred into coming back into civilization, into the developed world, where I'm like, should I eat that? Should I do that? And that voice is very clear. Just going to have another drink of water. Jewelry. This is a good one. All right. So they have beautiful jewelry, like this kind of stuff. Means different things, and so for me, women would bring out the jewelry, and the jewelry could involve like ape containers, tepes, earrings, bracelets, anklets, little feathers to put in their hair, big feathers to put in their hair, and there was almost like a Black Friday or an intensive like when the jewelry would come out, like everyone would just swoop it. And for me, I find that really uncomfortable. Like I can, and I know that I could like elbow my way in there. However, for me, like the feeling I got was just a no, like just allow it all to play out. And I could feel myself getting frustrated that there'd be people that would be buying up a lot of jewelry, and then like buying multiple bracelets, and it's like, well, you can't wear them all at once. And for me, that was my logic. And like, once you've got one, like allow other people to explore and see like what they want. So for me, that's like where, like the collectivist side of things, where it's like share for the family versus like a Western, like what can I get? They're very like, you could call it capitalist. You could call it like, it's not capitalist. It's like just ego and greed. This is what do I want? What can I get out of this? So for me, I feel like I have more of a collectivist vibe around like, well, let's share it. Like, I've got a piece, other people can get other pieces. So for me, I could feel myself getting really angry around it. Like, no one was like sharing, and I'm the eldest of 5, and I'm used to sharing, and that just might be my point of view. And part of me that just needs to start claiming more stuff for my own. However, the way it played out, like on our last day, we were waiting for one of the cleaning ladies to come, and we were all sitting in a circle, like debriefing and just having a chat. Like I'd packed my bags and I was ready to go, and she just came over and had some jewelry, and then the facilitator just held up a bracelet and said, "Oh, this is some new jewelry," and I said, "Sold." Like for me, that was it. That was the piece of jewelry that I needed, and it was beautiful, and it was completely unique. It was, it had like tassels coming off the bracelet, and for me, like, no one else had something like that. And for me, like I'm a bit of an anomalous type collector. I like collecting things that are anomalous, and that was one. That was a beautiful piece, and I got it, and very happy. And for me, it was just like I said, it happened as soon as I surrendered that I was going to leave without getting any jewelry. I was like, you know what? I've had such an amazing time. I'm grateful for the people that I've met. I'm grateful for the medicine experiences that I've had. And I'm just going to be okay with that. You know, it is what it is. And I knew that when we got home, there's markets in the area, in the town, Rio Branco, where I could potentially have got some other jewelry. And it's just like, you know what? I don't need to. Like, the concept of leaving with jewelry from the tribe had like an ego connotation. Like, nah, I got this from the tribe. However, like, it just felt like, you know what, fuck it. Like, it is what it is. If I'm meant to get something, I'm meant to get something. So for me, that was a really exceptional exercise in just surrendering and just allowing that my intention, depending on what its source, where it comes from, I will get whatever my inner child and my soul desires. Speaking of intention, the next tier of topic, I'll go into the ayahuasca itself. Now, I'll have the sip of water there. The crew. So the people that I went with were just fucking incredible. And they were all there for like an inner journey, to understand more about themselves, or to help hold the container to where we were going. Some of the guys were tagging along, like I mentioned before, to do like a 30-day dieta with ayahuasca, which is where you take like ayahuasca every day for 30 days, and you sit a special diet. And the others were like from various parts of the world, like New York, LA, Australia, Germany, and they were there for like an inner journey experience. And what was really important was the integration circles. So after a ceremony, we would all talk about our experience. And that was really important. And that echoes with my group work with men. And when I've worked with women, when everybody shares together, it's really powerful. And this is from Carl Rogers, like this kind of like encounter group where everybody's there for a common cause, and you all share based upon that common cause, and you go much deeper, and it helps with integration. because one person's story can help fill in blanks in your story and vice versa. So the crew was incredible, and for me, the setting as well was really important. So deep jungle, no technology, and the music was just amazing. Like these, like self-taught tribal members, like the women, how they sing in like there's this haunting security that comes from the music, and it was incredible. The setting was really important, and I find that the medicine mimicked the music. They called the medicine the force, which was, for me, they refer to it as a masculine energy. For me, ayahuasca is distinctly feminine. It's very flowy, it's very chaotic, it's very forgiving, and I feel like they describing it as a more masculine energy, filters into how they see sex, how they see relationships, and a whole bunch of other things. Anyway, I'll talk more about that on the third point. The way at one point we were taken up to the sacred village, which is like 2 hours north of the tribe that we were up. Just gonna have another sip of water. And we were joined by other people, other psychonauts, and it felt like the energy was very different there. And to get judgmental, they started coming in. They were allowed to come into our ceremonies, which was fine. However, their intention and the way I spoke to them, some of them, and the way that I felt around them was that they weren't really there for like an inner journey. They were more or less there to chase the peak experience. What do I mean about the peak experience? Peak experience is like where you want to chase, like talking to God, seeing shapes, like being able to share like experiences, seeing orbs, or being able to like this feels like it's just an ego trip. Like it doesn't feel like you're actually trying to understand yourself. Doesn't feel like you're trying to find some key pathways to serve the world or serve humanity. It just feels like you're there for your own gratification, and the medicine will do that. And for me, there was a malevolent and a benevolent side to ayahuasca, a light and dark side, which I feel like was a little bit disturbing for me. And I can see, like, with any medicine, it really depends on your intention. And for me, the intention of being able to give without losing myself was very important. The medicine will allow you to splinter off into fragments of random thoughts, and I feel like it's really good to refine your mind and focus on very specific things, and then it can tease apart that for you. There's so many flashes of experiences, past, present, potentially future, that you will see on the medicine, that it can be quite complex for your mind to integrate. And I feel like it rewires something at a neurological level, and like for me, like I feel like I have so much more space, so much more. I'm much more relaxed, and I've had that, compliment passed on to me since I've got back. That I have much more space and much more at peace, and it takes a lot of energy to be at peace. It takes a lot of energy to come back into that centered space. So intention is really important. Going into that. So sometimes before a ceremony, I will like ask some of the crew that we went with, like, what's your intention? What's your intention? What are you doing this time? Like, what's going on? Because I feel like that's really important to distill before you take that first cup, while you're sitting, waiting for that first cup to activate. I feel like there's also like just taking ayahuasca for a bucket list. Like, sure, but I really feel like it's an ego thing. Like, if you're not called to do it, like, why the hell are you doing it? I feel like it's a medicine. Like, like putting antibiotics on a bucket list is like, well, it's the same thing. So if you see it as a medicine, you will treat it like a medicine. If you treat it like an ego trip, like doing something you're not called for, then I really don't feel like you'll get the best benefit out of it. So I think a connection to spirit and a connection to your inner authority is really important. And then you will know. You will be invited to this, which is what I was. I was invited. I was invited to go. And I got, yes, this is time for me to go. Another sip of water. Now the music. They would start with chanting, and then they'd use instruments. And the medicine matched the music. This was insane. So I feel like if you're doing it in a city setting, or if you're trying to doing it in secret, or like if you somehow managed to get some brew and you want to do it in your bedroom, like it's not going to be the same experience. Like the music in that jungle setting was it matched it. It was the steady beat that kept you grounded, and when they picked up the instruments, the medicine intensified. And I was like, what? At every single ceremony it was like this. And I could hypothesize around how the music and the brain stimulation, something happens in that, and the medicine is added to that. However, I feel like in the setting where it starts off with chanting and then moves into a much more intense, as the night progresses, it really changes how the medicine works. And that was like, that was mind blowing for me. And I feel like my visions and the intention that I had more breakthroughs when the music got more intense. Light and dark side. Now, I had an intention to go there to talk to her about what was going on in the world. Spirit is a two-way conversation, and for me, like I feel like the more I saw about the shadow components that was going on in the tribe, the more I wanted to explain to her like how we could actually start looking at repairing some of the fractures in the world, the hyperdimensional matrix, some of these components where I feel like there's a humility and I'm coming to you with something that doesn't seem like people have been taking this medicine for a long time, and it doesn't feel like it's really filtered through into the 3D realm. So it was just like, this is going on at the moment, and it felt like I needed to bring that to her. The first setting, it felt like she didn't want to listen to me, and that was part of a process. It felt that the more I wanted to force her to listen to me, the more like the what I was seeing would go to black, and that didn't really feel good for me. Like I could feel like I'm forcing her to listen to me, and that played into like relationships that I've had in the past, and stuff around my dad, and like women in general, where like I can't force anybody to listen to me, no matter how important I think it is that they need to listen to me. So that was a perfect process around me just letting shit go, letting what I have to say go, and just she's going to come to me whenever she was ready to listen. And that's how my life has played out in general, where like it's just like I'll just keep my mouth shut, and then someone will come to me, ask me a question, and then I can share. I feel like there's the masculine and the feminine dynamic is where like she will take you anywhere you will want to go. She is flowy, she is chaotic, she is forever reinventing. It's just this continuous birth process, birth, life, death, life type process where it's just unstoppable, and it really comes down to you as the individual sitting in the medicine to choose where you want to go. And I feel like that's where it's like in relationships, and the way the masculine is in general. I feel like it's the focus. It's the focus that brings the clarity. It's the focus that brings the direction. Otherwise, it's just you're all over the place. You're all over the shop. Another sip of water. Okay, next point will be on the damage that has been done by the missionaries. I think the missionaries were like Protestant, and they basically destroyed the culture. they've only just recently left, and there's so much shame around like nudity. I feel like there'll be shame around their spiritual practices, and it felt like there was a lot of religious control in the area, and this projection that they knew better and didn't take into any context like the connection to the land, the connection to the spirits, the plant medicines, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of sadness for me around that. I feel like the Christian and religions in general, and anything that becomes dogmatic, anything that becomes like, nah, this is what you should be doing, this is the better way of doing things. And I know the irony of me attempting to explain to the medicine around what I see in the world and how we could do it better. However, there's an element of surrender, like when you start to see like in Australia in particular, where we removed children from Indigenous families, it's like, well, like straight away you've just created multi-generational trauma. Like you've just created like a fracture in a culture. So I feel like there's a lot of damage that's done by missionaries, and it's still playing out. Like a lot of people go to church on Sundays. A lot of them are wearing like religious hats and like crucifixes and all that kind of stuff. And I really feel like there's a dilution of the complexity of the spirit world, where in a lot of the occult stuff that I look at, and the esoteric stuff that I look at, like that duality is a con job, and there's much more to it than just those two dynamics of like the devil and Jesus and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like there's a lot of damage done by missionaries and not much forgiveness. I really feel like there's not much remorse there around it, and I feel like there's a space there for that. It needs to be facilitated. There's a lot of shame around nudity and showing body parts. A lot of them wear modern clothes. Anthropologically, they want to be like us as well. So like this romanticizing of like tribes do it better. They're watching plasma TVs and watching soccer, and they've brought in like technologies from the Western world like petrol and plastics, and there's not really a best practice on how to use those. So they've got this technology and they haven't really been shown how to use it correctly. Like they're still sucking petrol out of through like tubes to decant it into their boats. There'll be like runoff into the river and runoff from oil when they lubricate the shafts of their boats into the river. Two-stroke, like the bottles are along the riverbanks, old broken propellers, like thrown either into the water or onto the banks. So there's like this. There's the people themselves are wounded around. First of all, they're wounded around respect for the environment, and similar to what the Westerners are. And then there's also a level of like ignorance around how to treat Western technology and how to dispose of it, how to treat it properly. So I feel like there's this romanticizing and objectification of like living in the jungle and being in the jungle, and like it's not what you think it is. And I feel like we need to stop retelling that story. And I know there's untouched tribes in the Amazon. However, they're based on what I saw and what I think I would see in those tribes. There's still going to be a lot of childhood wounding. There's still going to be wounding that plays out. There's going to be like a very patriarchal type layout there, where the women are treated with respect but still as lesser beings. And I feel like there's that plays out in shadow. Like they will still have issues going on, and they probably let it turn a blind eye to it. So without that objective view, like a lot of them I feel like are too close to the problem to be objective. So without that, like just, and it is what it is. I feel like, but however, my standing statement is that we need to stop romanticizing that living in a tribal situation is better than the Western world. They're neither no better, no worse than what we are. I feel like the connection to nature and spirit is super important. I also feel like having the overlays of being able to address childhood wounding, trauma, needs that scientific and a framework to be able to do that. And then with technology as well, like antibiotics and just basic food security and food health are important. Loss of plant knowledge. So part of this damage done by missionaries with this huge loss of plant knowledge. And like when someone dies, particularly if it's one of these medicine men, like a huge portion of plant knowledge goes, and which is really sad. And I feel like that's what you get when you do like word of mouth generational transfers of knowledge. So when you don't write anything down, don't transcribe it onto like tablets or voice recorded or whatever it is, like which is where like when the printing press came along for us in the Industrial Revolution, like it really changed how we communicate. And downside of that is, of course, you can take things out of context. The way the Westerners do very, very well in the developed world, we do very, very well. We take things out of context. Cambo and drinking water versus Kasuma, for example. Having tofu without iodine, seaweed, for example, are perfect examples of that. However, I feel like there's a lot of plants in the Amazon, and they need to be prepared properly, and they could have huge ramifications, not just for trauma work, but for other medicinal properties as well. I feel like there's a lot of younger men in the tribe that have been saddled with a cultural burden to rebuild. And they say that they feel like they're doing what their purpose is, but I know that look. Like I see it in our men's work, and I see a man that is doing something that's not his soul's purpose. I can see it in his eyes, and I know the energy. And one of the men there, he was told by his grandfather that he needed to continue the tradition. And for me, like from a psychological point of view, I feel like that's really bullshit, and it sucks that you put that on someone, because the grandfather may or may not know that. The grandfather could have just been saying it out of fear of trying to keep the tribe alive. And who knows, that man, if he was following his soul purpose, could do something completely different that's in alignment with his spirit and source in general. And when you don't do things that are in alignment, it plays out in trauma. You get into relationships that were not for you. You start doing things out of resentment instead of something that isn't in alignment. And I see that in the Western world, like that same burden of like going to university, getting a job that you were recommended to by your year advisor, or following your dad's footsteps of something where you could see that he was really successful in. But really, when you connect with your spirit, when you connect with your inner child, it's nothing related to what you actually really need to be doing. So that's very much in parallels with the developed world. And because of this trauma, because of this multi-generational trauma from missionaries and from unaddressed stuff around like how to treat people equally, and like this hybridization of like collectivist and egoist, and not addressing the shadow, not addressing the primal leftovers of humanity, which we have, and it's trapped in the musculature. We do it in our work all the time, and it's playing through in the children. Like, I would watch the children play, and particularly the way they treat animals, it's pure shadow. Like, they'd have like cats and dogs there, and they would kick the dog. And for me, like, I'm just gonna have another sip of water. Like, kicking dogs is like, it's pure shadow. Like, it's a creature that can't talk back. It's a creature that is helpless and relies on you, and like children treating animals that way, I just see it's pure shadow. Same with when they would catch fish. They'd catch fish in like a little creek and dam there, and they would like throw the fish or kick the fish. And for me, it's like there's no need to do that. Like I feel like if you honor that, it's like, well, thank you. Like you train that. So there's a shadow component there, which will play out in that generation as being much more aggressive. I don't know how they handle like sexual deviancy or rape there. However, it feels like there is a shadow and a shame side to whatever's going on there that's not being addressed. That was quite palpable for me. I was very aware of that. Seeing the medicine, jumping back to the ayahuasca point, seeing the medicine as a panacea, I feel like it's not a panacea. It deals with a lot of stuff in like the physical. However, the psychological framework is really required. So if anyone's going there with like this dream of like, no, I just take ayahuasca and I can fix everything, or I can do this, it's like, it's not. It's you're looking outside of yourself for a solution for your own shit. And I feel like if you go into it with that intention, then you're not going to get the best benefits out of it. I feel like it's like a lot of things. We demonize pharmaceuticals, and then we romanticize nature. And I feel like they're both sides of the same spectrum, and we need to come in the middle. We need to understand that everything has a place, and it really relies on your inner authority and your ability to trust the credibility of people in authority. What I loved about it was the pace of life. It really is a downshift. Although I wasn't there doing any farming or doing any building, me being there as an observer was a beautiful pace of life for me. And I feel like to experience that was beautiful, like being completely disconnected from technology, like no Facebook, no Instagram, no like alarms going off, no anything. Was really cool, and just being reminded of when to have dinner, and then the time flexibility. So it's jungle time, it's like equator time, where wherever the sun is and whatever's going on is when you do things. So like some of the ceremonies, we might only find out like a day, that day that we'll be doing a ceremony, or this would change, or that would change, or we'll be moving somewhere one night, and we may or may not be staying there another night. So it was just very relaxed. And for me, being spontaneous is challenging. However, in that environment, just knowing that everybody's in the same boat made it very easy for me to sink into. I was able to return to that peace, which I enjoy. Food security is really important there. So they're trying to be self-sustaining, and they're deploying like permaculture practices. And I mentioned syntropic farming, which is actually from Brazil, to include in some of those practices, like using like human manure and tilling the soil a bit, but not tilling the soil, but like no-till type planting. You could really turn the whole area into something that is sustainable for the entire tribe, and then some. I ate a lot of bananas. I love bananas, and they're really good bananas. I feel like, I don't know if you're familiar with the saying, it takes a tribe to raise a child. It feels like there's room there for family counselling and catharsis for the underlying rage and wrath at the damage that was done by the missionaries. And then catharsis at dealing with tribal matters, an underlying rage towards partners or men that are athletically more inclined, so they attract women, or more musically inclined, which you attract women. So the men that don't have that, that don't have those abilities, there will be resentment. We are biological beings, and without being able to express or feel the remorse of not feeling good enough or feeling unworthy. You really need a container for that to be able to explore that. And then for the women, being married off, or not being able to argue back with a husband, or being able to say no to a husband, or I could see that dynamic playing out where the energy between partners was I can't see the affection here. I can't see that love and affection that I would expect to see from a coherent community. In the developed world, where I see couples that have gone to counsels, therapy, and have done a lot of catharsis and know how to express that lower self and that darkness, they're much more connected, they're much more open, they're much more transparent. And I feel in a public setting, and I feel that's missing there. There's space for that, and I feel if you do it well, it could really heal a lot of multi-generational stuff. And it will end up playing out in shadow. So worst case scenario, rapes, murder, killing, there will be some component that will eventually happen, and they'll, like we do in the developed world, they'll chalk it up to it's some random event for someone with mental illness, not realizing it's a distillation of the entire community's shadow that's just hit into one person, and that's just how it's played out. Architecture is amazing. I really love their huts. I really love how they build things. The mosquitoes were intense. They were like sandflies, and if you didn't cover up, or if you didn't use any kind of repellent, you'd be eaten alive. I really enjoyed being there. I don't feel like I'd take ayahuasca again. It's not a medicine for me. I feel talking to people and doing the catharsis is much more beneficial for me in understanding what I've healed from. It was an amazing experience, and I really felt like it was important for me to bring this back, to see this and bring it back to the developed world and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. They're not that different. Same shit, different time zone, different geographical location. And yeah, that feels like all I have to say on that. So if you've listened this far, it was a very long one, and if you feel like there is somebody else that could benefit from listening to this, by all means share it. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you all more soon. Much love. This is John Kai Herbert, and you've been listening to the Emotive Firmware Podcast. Bye.